Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Today we're heading deep into the heart of Texas, a land as wide as its legends, and just as haunted. From ghostly lights flickering over forgotten rivers, to ancient secrets better left untouched, get ready for 5 of the most disturbing true Texas roadside attractions, with a dark past that'll make you question what's real, and what's waiting just beyond the edge of your sight. But before we jump in, there's one thing most viewers forget. They leave without hitting that subscribe button. And by doing that, they miss out on the creepiest, spine-chilling stories only the bravest souls dare to hear. Don't be that person. Smash that subscribe button right now, because tonight is just the beginning, and the darkness waiting out there is far from over. So, where are you watching from? And what time is it on your side? Drop it in the comments below, because here, the night's just getting started, and the real horror is about to unfold. All right, now let's step into the shadows. There's something about certain places that just feels wrong. Not loud, not obvious, but a kind of quiet sickness in the air. A heaviness that you can't quite explain, like the moment just before a storm breaks. In Junction, Texas, that place is the old pedestrian bridge that stretches over the Llano River like a scar nobody wants to talk about. It was built in 1939, part of a Works Progress Administration project that was supposed to bring jobs and pride to the town. And maybe it did, for a while. But the bridge came with something else too. Something older. Something that was already there, waiting. It was a simple thing. Wooden planks bolted to steel trusses, suspended by thick cables that groaned like dying cattle when the wind picked up. From the start, it felt off. The kind of off that makes your stomach turn without reason. Dogs refused to cross it. Even birds seemed to avoid flying over it. People made excuses to take the long way around. They'd blame traffic or errands. But the truth was, once you stepped onto that bridge, you felt like you were being watched. And not just by someone across the river. Watched from underneath. Watched from the cracks between the planks. Watched from the water. By the early 60s, the stories had already begun. Local kids swore they heard voices coming from the river late at night. Not the usual animal noises or distant calls. These were close, personal. Sometimes it was laughter. Sometimes a voice that sounded like their own mother calling them by name. And always, just before something touched their ankle, cold and damp and finger-like, they'd run screaming home, and the grown-ups would laugh and chalk it up to nerves or overactive imaginations. But even the grown-ups didn't walk that bridge after dark. Then came the summer of 1964. Melanie Dupree was 16, a high school cheerleader, smart, sweet, popular. The kind of girl who had a future lined up for her like dominoes. College, marriage, babies, church potlucks. She had a crooked smile that made boys go stupid, and a laugh that stuck in your head for days. On the night she vanished, she'd stayed late at school for cheer practice. Her best friend offered her a ride, but Melanie said no. She liked walking home. Said it helped her think. And besides, the stars were out, and the air smelled like honeysuckle and fresh-cut grass. She was last seen walking toward the bridge. She never made it home. A town-wide search began before midnight. Hundreds joined in. Dogs, boats, flashlights. They combed the banks, called her name until their voices went raw. The only thing they found was a single white canvas sneaker in the dead center of the bridge. Clean, dry, sitting upright like someone had set it there gently. The river was dragged for 2 days. Divers went down and came back shaken, talking about strange undercurrents, pressure changes that made their ears bleed. One diver quit on the spot, said he saw a girl's face staring up at him from the silt, eyes open, mouth moving, but no bubbles. They told him it was the bends, nitrogen narcosis, but he never went in the water again. Melanie's body was never recovered, and that's when the stories turned darker. Every year since, on the anniversary of Melanie's disappearance, July 3rd, people have heard it. Always around 11:17 p.m. A burst of giggling, light footsteps across the bridge, then a splash, loud, sharp, final, and then silence so complete it makes your ears ring. And then the bridge begins to move, not from the wind, not from footsteps. It just swings back and forth, slow and steady, like a cradle being rocked by a patient hand. The sound of the cables groaning is enough to make your skin crawl, and if you're standing close, if you're foolish enough to still be there after dark, you'll feel it. Something watching you. Something just under the surface of the river, just behind the railing, just past your shoulder. In 1983, the county decided to rebuild the bridge. People had stopped using it, said it was unstable, said it creaked too much, said it smelled like rot, even in winter. The new version was stronger, reinforced with steel plates, new planks, concrete footings sunk deep into bedrock. The engineers swore it was safer than ever. But a week after it opened, a jogger claimed she saw a girl standing in the center of the bridge, barefoot, soaking wet, her cheer uniform clinging to her bones. She smiled, and then vanished. They called it a hallucination. Heat stroke, maybe. But she wasn't the last. In the years since, dozens have come forward. They've heard laughter, seen shadows standing on the bridge when it's empty. Some say they've seen their own reflection wave to them from the river when they weren't moving. Others swear that the bridge isn't just swinging, it's breathing, that if you stand on it long enough, it begins to pull you into its rhythm. One girl claimed the planks pulsed under her feet like a heartbeat. Another man, drunk and trying to impress his friends, walked to the middle at midnight and never came back. His hat was found nailed to the railing. No one admitted to doing it. Some say the bridge is cursed, that it was built over sacred ground, that before white settlers came, the land was used by the Comanche for blood rites and burials. Others claim that during a fever outbreak in the 1800s, townsfolk drowned a healer woman in the river, blaming her for the deaths. But no matter who you ask, the message is the same. Don't walk that bridge at night, because if you do, you might not come back alone. There's a local legend, one whispered at sleepovers and passed around at barbecues, that says, if you bring an offering to the bridge at midnight, you can ask Melanie a question, a shoe, a picture, a trinket from your youth, something you loved when you were 16. If the river accepts it, the wind will stop and you'll hear her voice. And if she answers your question, you'll know the truth. But truth is a dangerous thing, because sometimes it's not Melanie who answers. Sometimes it's the thing that took her. They say whatever it is down there, it feeds on memory, on youth, on the hope people carry with them when they walk across that bridge thinking nothing bad can ever really happen. That thing waits in the dark, in the deep places where the water doesn't move and time doesn't pass. And once a year, it takes a breath. Giggles, splash, silence, and the bridge swings back and forth, waiting, always waiting. There's a spot along Highway 90, somewhere between Valentine and a long stretch of nowhere, where the desert starts whispering if you listen too long. Most folks miss it, or they don't want to see it. Just a tiny building out in the emptiness, glass-fronted, pristine white, sitting like a joke played on the wasteland. It's a Prada storefront, or at least it looks like one. High heels and handbags gleam under fluorescent lights that aren't connected to any grid. It's always locked. Nobody goes in, nothing comes out. It's not a store, it's art. That's what the locals say now. An art installation. Modern, ironic. A commentary on consumerism or some such nonsense. But the land it sits on, that land has a memory longer than concrete and stronger than steel. You ask the old-timers in Valentine, and they won't talk about art. They'll talk about the Garcia family. The Garcias were ranchers, old stock, settled the land back in the late 1800s, owned a wide spread of it, most of it useless scrub. But they didn't raise cattle, or crops, or anything anyone could see. They kept to themselves, and they worshipped something that didn't have a name you said out loud. Santa Muerte, sure. The Holy Death, the bony lady with the scythe and candlelit altar. But the stories go deeper, darker. They say the Garcias spoke to things that weren't gods and weren't devils either. Just old, cold, patient. In October of 1951, the entire family vanished. Every last one. 8 people. No signs of struggle, no blood trails leading away from the house. But inside, Jesus God, what was left behind made even the county sheriff go pale. Slabs of raw meat in the hallway, laid out like offerings. Goat heads nailed to the walls. Blood handprints smeared across every doorframe, like something had crawled through them all, testing, choosing. And on the kitchen table, carved deep enough to split the wood, La muerte se queda. Death stays. They never found the bodies. The house stood empty for years. Locals said the ground went sour. Grass refused to grow. Cows gave birth to stillborn calves if they wandered too close. Eventually, the house was bulldozed. That should have been the end of it. But you know how these things go. Stories don't stay buried in West Texas. They just wait for someone stupid enough to dig them up. Fast forward to 2005. A couple of European artists install a fake Prada store out in the middle of that same land. They get permits, make speeches about high fashion in low places, sign deals with donors. The building goes up in a weekend. White walls, big glass windows, a soft yellow light that never goes out. No electricity lines, just solar power, clean, sterile, safe. But things started going wrong almost immediately. The first sign was the crows. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They came on the first night after the installation opened, circled over the store for hours, shrieking and flapping and smashing into the glass like they were trying to get inside. Dead ones littered the dirt by morning, their necks twisted, eyes missing. A biologist blamed West Nile. Locals didn't bother coming up with excuses. Then came the lights. Travelers started reporting flickers, flashes in the windows like someone walking past inside, even though it's just one small room. One woman swore she saw a tall figure in red heels, standing perfectly still by the glass, her face obscured by long dark hair. When she turned back to look again, it was gone. But the heel marks were still in the dust, fresh and sharp. The worst was in 2011. A man from El Paso tried to break in one night, some wannabe influencer looking for clout, maybe trying to steal a bag or film something edgy. He smashed the glass with a crowbar, then used a shard to slit both his wrists, right there on the sand. They found him barely alive, blood soaked into the dirt like black paint. He couldn't stop whispering, "She needed red. She needed red." They tried to pin it on psychosis, drugs, maybe heat stroke. But no one could explain why the inside of the building was clean. Not a speck of blood, not a fingerprint. And the glass he broke? It was back in place the next morning, uncracked, like nothing ever happened. The whispers got louder after that. Travelers started going missing. Not many, just one or two every few years. A drifter here, a hitchhiker there. Enough that people started to notice a pattern. They were always last seen near Prada Marfa. One of them even texted a friend before disappearing. "She's watching me." That was the last anyone heard from him. They say if you go out there after midnight, the rules change. The desert gets too quiet, the air too still. Your phone won't work, your car might stop, and if you get too close to the glass, you'll feel it. That hum behind the silence, like something breathing through the building. Not from it, through it. There's a theory that the Prada store isn't just art, that it's a box, a vessel, not for shoes or purses, but for whatever the Garcias woke up back in the day. The concrete and glass don't keep it in, they keep us out. And every once in a while, it wants something. A sacrifice maybe, a soul in exchange for a moment of glamour. Because let's face it, that store doesn't belong out there. Nothing does. The desert doesn't want pretty things. It wants blood. Always has. So if you ever find yourself on Highway 90, somewhere outside Valentine, and the sun's going down, don't stop. No matter how much your GPS tells you, it's a cool place for a photo. No matter how many influencers posted it on TikTok. No matter how curious you are about the red heels in the window. Because she's still there, waiting, watching. And if she whispers to you, don't listen, no matter what she says. She doesn't want company. She wants color, and you've got red in you. Plenty of it. There's a patch of land on the outskirts of Houston, way past the Beltway, where the neighborhoods thin out and the roads stop pretending to be busy. You wouldn't find it on a tourist map. There's no parking lot, no welcome sign. But if you drive far enough down a cracked service road and follow the sound of wind moving wrong through the trees, you'll see them. 4 fiberglass giants, 12 feet tall, weathered and pale under Texas sun. John, Paul, George, and Ringo, the Beatles, standing side by side in a lonely field, staring across the weeds like they've been waiting for something. Or someone. Their features are just realistic enough to be unsettling. Not quite wax museum wrong, but close. Close enough to twitch something deep in your lizard brain. Eyes a little too hollow. Cheeks a little too taut. Mouths set in that slight smug grin, like they know a joke you'll never get. Locals call them the Beatles gods. Not lovingly. The story goes that a man named Charlie Danziger built them in the late 90s. No one's quite sure where he got the money. He worked at a record store in Montrose, barely scraping by. But around 95, he vanished off the grid, quit his job, sold his apartment, and disappeared. People assumed he'd cracked. They weren't entirely wrong. He resurfaced 3 years later on a weed-choked lot with 4 massive statues strapped to a flatbed trailer and a look in his eye that said he hadn't slept in a long, long time. Claimed he'd built them himself. Wouldn't say where, wouldn't say how. Charlie was what you'd call a superfan, obsessive, used to tell people he'd been touched by the music. He talked about Abbey Road the way priests talk about scripture. But sometime in the late 90s, his obsession shifted, got darker. He told a friend, the last one who ever spoke to him actually, that the songs had changed. Said there were new messages under the old lyrics, things only he could hear. "They speak when I sleep," he whispered once. John says the stars are hollow. George hums something, wet. And Ringo, he just watches. He died in 2004. They found his body curled at the base of the Lenin statue, mouth open, eyes bulging like he'd seen something so big, his heart just stopped trying. The autopsy called it cardiac arrest. But the first cop on scene said Charlie's face looked like it had been pulled back. frozen in the kind of terror you only see on people who stare too long into the dark and find it staring back. After that, the statues just stayed. No one wanted to move them. It was like they belonged to the land now, or the land belonged to them. The city ignored it. Developers stayed away. The field grew wilder. Weeds climbed up Lenin's boots. Fire ants made homes in Paul's pant legs. But no matter how much the weather tore at them, the statues never toppled, never cracked, never even chipped, and people started talking. Teenagers dared each other to visit at night, to spend time between the statues. Most didn't last long. The air in that space, that circle, because that's what it feels like, even though they're just standing in a row. It's thick, not hot, not cold, just charged. Like the moment before a lightning strike that never comes. Phones glitch out, audio records static, compasses spin, and sometimes, if you're quiet, you hear it. Music, not a full song, just pieces, a fragment of a guitar riff that doesn't exist, a backwards voice saying something you almost understand, and if you stay too long, your ears start to ring. Real bad. Like something inside your skull is pushing to get out. One girl, Amber Wilkes, she tried to sleep there for a dare in 2011. She made it 3 hours before she came screaming out of the field with blood on her shirt and the word help scratched into her arm, so deep it never fully faded. When her parents asked what happened, she just cried and said, "They don't blink. They never blink." Another kid, Ricky Alvarez, said he saw Ringo turn his head a few inches when the moon came out. Just a little shift, like someone cracking their neck. When his friends laughed, Ricky didn't. He moved to Arizona 6 weeks later. But the weirdest thing? It's always George. People say if you stand in front of his statue for too long, your ears start to hum. Just softly at first, like tinnitus. Then louder. You'll swear you hear strings tuning themselves, slowly, wrong, like bones stretching into the shape of music. And if you don't move, if you let it in, you'll hear something worse. You'll hear him. George, whispering in your ear, like he's right behind you. Something about the desert being an old mouth. Something about frequencies buried in your teeth. One guy claimed George told him the Beatles didn't write their songs. They just transcribed them. From something older. Something that lives under Liverpool. Something that wanted to be heard again. He laughed when he said it, but he didn't blink once. So what do you do with a story like this? A cursed shrine in the shape of 4 British rock legends? Nothing. You leave it. You keep driving. You tell yourself it's just local legend, the way all horror stories are, a campfire tale stretched out under too many beers and too much moonlight. But if you're ever down in Houston and your GPS takes a weird turn and you find yourself in a patch of land where the grass won't grow right and the trees lean away from the center, don't stop. Don't stare too long into John's eyes. Don't listen to George. And if you hear a song you don't recognize playing in your head, cover your ears, run, and for the love of God, don't sing along. There's a corner of the Texas hill country where the land doesn't feel quite Texan. The trees don't move like they should, the birds go quiet too fast, and the air tastes stale, no matter how fresh the breeze. It's not something tourists notice when they drive through on their way to wine tastings, or those kitschy little roadside towns that sell hand-stitched quilts and locally churned butter. But locals know, especially the old ones. They won't say it directly. They'll just give you a look when you bring it up, a long, flat look, like they're measuring whether or not you'd believe the truth if they gave it to you. The truth sits out there off Highway 39, rising from the grass like a bruise on the land. Stonehenge II, a life-sized replica of the real deal, built by two eccentric Texans, Doug Hill and Al Shepard, back in the late 80s. They said it was just art, a tribute, something fun and weird for the tourists. And for a while, it was. Folks would come from all over to snap Polaroids and say how peculiar it was to see something so ancient and English smack in the middle of red dirt and mesquite trees. There was even a fake Easter Island head nearby, like a cherry on top of the oddity sundae. But then came the drought. 2009 hit Texas like a slow suffocation. The creeks dried up. The Llano River dropped to a crawl. And the earth around Stonehenge II cracked wide open like a thirsty mouth. That's when the bones started showing up. At first, they were small, tiny even. People thought they were animal remains, dogs maybe, raccoons. But then someone found a jawbone, human. Still had a molar in it, gold filling glinting in the sun. The Kerr County Sheriff's Office showed up fast, too fast. Within a day, the site was cordoned off. Men in state uniforms dug a little, talked a little, then shut everything down. Official word? Historic burial site. Nothing to see here. Move along. But word leaked. A construction worker who helped lay gravel out there said one of the bones had a Rolex still clasped around it. Another swore he saw a skull with a baseball cap caved in at the side. Fresh bones, not ancient, not even old, but no names, no investigation, no news reports. And then there was the hiker, Tommy Bell, 32, local. Used to hike the trails around the site every weekend. Said it calmed his nerves, until one Sunday morning in 2011, when he called his sister, whispering into the phone, like someone was listening. "I found a leg," he said. Still had a boot on it. Timberland, new, laces tied. The meat was fresh, like warm. He vanished 6 days later, left his house unlocked, his car in the driveway, and his phone on the kitchen counter, battery still half full. Cops said he probably got lost in the woods, but anyone who knew Tommy knew he could hike blindfolded out there. He once walked a trail in pitch black, just to prove a point. They never found his body. Just a note in his front yard, stuck to the grass with a piece of black flint. It said, "The stones remember." That's when the mood shifted for good. Locals stopped visiting. Tourists still came, of course. People never learn. But folks who lived within a 10-mile radius started locking their doors at sundown. Some moved away. Others started putting salt lines across their windowsills. And no one went near the stones during the solstices. You see, there are stories now. Whispers passed around barrooms and back porches when the sky turns gray and the beer gets heavy in your gut. Stories about what people have seen out there when the nights get long and the stars go sharp. Hooded figures, always in silence, standing in a perfect circle among the stones, arms lifted like antennas, reaching for some forgotten signal. No one knows who they are. They don't speak. They don't move. They just wait. A guy named Mark Rumley swears he saw them during the winter solstice in 2018. He was drunk, sure, but not so drunk he couldn't remember what he saw. Said he parked down the road and crawled up a ridge with binoculars, hoping to catch a glimpse of something weird. What he got was a front row seat to a ritual straight out of a medieval nightmare. They stood there for hours, he said, not moving, not talking, just standing like statues. And then the drums started, low at first, barely more than a heartbeat, then louder, then faster. He said he felt it in his chest, like something under the earth was thumping back. He looked down at the stones and swore one of them, just one, began to glow faint red. Not like fire, more like an ember, like something underneath it was waking up. He ran. Mark's hair turned white in the front 2 weeks later. His left hand started shaking, never stopped. He moved to Oregon last year, The thing is, it's not just the solstices anymore. Some nights, especially the hot ones when the sky hangs low and the frogs go silent, you might hear the drums, not from the site, number from your house. Faint at first, like thunder. You'll tell yourself it's nothing. You'll turn up the TV. You'll hum something just to break the silence. But if they keep going, if they get louder, whatever you do, don't look out the window. Because some folks who did, they say they saw a face staring back. Not angry, not sad, just waiting. And if the drums stop all at once, pray they weren't meant for you. Because the stones out there in Ingram, they weren't built. Not really. Not by us. They were remembered. And now that they're awake, they're remembering who was buried there before. And who's next. The Devil's Sinkhole. Just hearing the name makes the hairs on your neck stand up like a warning. It's not just a hole in the ground. Anybody can see that it's deep, yawning wide like the maw of some ancient beast, sucking the sky down with it. You drive out of Rock Springs, past dusty ranches and cracked roads, until the trees start thinning and the land falls away into something colder. The sinkhole sits there, a perfect circle of darkness that swallows the horizon. At first glance, it's just a natural cave, a sinkhole formed over millennia, the kind you'd expect in the Texas hill country. But it's what happens after dark that sets the Devil's Sinkhole apart. Every night, like clockwork, millions of bats spiral out from its depths. They pour out in thick clouds, blackening the moon as they rush toward the sky like a living storm. Tourists come to watch. Some even set up camp nearby to catch the spectacle. Rangers, though, warn them to keep their distance, not because of the bats themselves, but because the earth around the sinkhole is fragile. It shifts and settles in strange ways, as if the ground itself were breathing and restless. But the real warning is in the stories. Stories whispered quietly by the locals, told with eyes darting to the dark rim of that cavernous mouth. They say sometimes the ground trembles, even when there's no quake. Sometimes the wind carries a whisper, soft and sinister, rising from the blackness below. People say they've seen pale hands clawing upward from the edge, ghostly and desperate, fading before you can blink. The sinkhole has teeth no one can measure, and it's hungry. Back in the summer of 1972, a group of spelunkers, young men and women, full of bravado and headlamps, ventured into the Devil's Sinkhole. They were experienced, or so everyone thought. They set out at dusk, promising to explore the depths and return by morning with stories of the Earth's hidden veins. But something inside the sinkhole had other plans. Days passed. Search parties combed the area. 2 of the spelunkers were found on the rim, shaken and mumbling, but alive. The others were nowhere to be found. One man emerged alone, Rick Hammond. His face was pale, smeared with blood, eyes clouded and wild. He was silent at first, then began ranting incoherently about black-eyed things with teeth like glass. His words clawed at anyone who tried to listen. Rick never spoke clearly again. He was committed to a mental institution where he faded into silence over the next 2 years, his mind slowly unraveling until death claimed him like a long, terrible release. What exactly happened down there, nobody knows. The search for the missing was called off. Some say the others were swallowed by the earth itself. Others believe they never left. Since then, the sinkhole carries a weight. On most nights, the bats will rise as expected, a living black veil that dances with the moonlight. But sometimes, there's nothing. Not a single wing beats against the sky. The silence that falls is thick and suffocating, like the world is holding its breath. And then comes the scream. It echoes from the depths, sharp and raw, an impossible sound that cuts through the quiet like a jagged blade. It's a scream of terror, of pain, and something darker, something that no one alive should hear. The rangers tell tourists to leave, to move back from the edge, but even they don't always listen, because some nights, when the wind is still and the sky is heavy with stars, you can swear you see those pale hands reaching out. You can hear whispers that aren't carried by the wind, but seem to bubble up from the earth itself. If you ever find yourself near the Devil's Sinkhole after dark, and the bats stay silent, do one thing. Run. Because whatever lives down there waits, and it's hungry for more than just bats.